In this video, we're going to show you how to build a DIY nightstand valet organizer using mahogany wood from Osborne. This is going to feature our dimensional lumber that you can find on our website below. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. For this project, we're using the 4x1 S4S lumber from Osborne in mahogany. This project lumber is square on 4 sides, making it easy to use for your projects, and is available in a large number of premium wood species. As I mentioned, we chose mahogany for this project, but we also offer it in white oak, hickory, hard maple, black walnut, beech, and many more. To get started, I'm gluing up 2 of these boards side by side to make the base of our nightstand valet. Since each board is 4 inches wide, this will give us an overall width on our base of 8 inches, and I cut the length to 12 inches. We can add a little bit of wood glue to each edge and then clamp them together, making sure to add a clamp on top to avoid any kind of warping. We will be planing this panel down, but it is important to remove as much glue as possible with a damp rag, especially if you do not plan to plane down the panel for using it in your project. While the base of our stand is drying, we can move on to creating the watch holder section of our organizer. I want to go ahead and get all of the glue ups out of the way so that they can be dry whenever I'm ready to do a final assembly. For the watch holder, I'm going to glue 2 of these boards on top of each other so that I have a thicker width that I can shape depending on the size of my watches. This area is completely customizable to your needs and can be sized based on bracelets, watches, or necklaces. I'll add a decent amount of glue in between each boards and clamp them together while they dry. Next, we can remove the base from the clamps and get ready to work on the final details. It's important to remove as much glue squeeze out as possible before running the panel through your planer to avoid damaging your machine. I'm only removing a small amount of material from my panel to keep it around a 1-inch thick board in the end. This will ensure that any excess glue is removed from the surface and the seam between each board is flush. Once the panel is planed down, I wanted to add a full round over on the top and bottom edge to give it a softer look. I found the easiest way to do this was to use my router table with a large roundover bit, but you could do this with a handheld router as well, depending on the tools that you have available. We will be applying Rubio Monocoat to this project so we can sand the panel to 150 grit and clean up any areas that the router table left on the roundovers. Once the sanding is complete, we can set it aside until the final assembly. Now that the lumber for the watch holder is dry, we can remove it from the clamps and begin shaping it. To fit my watches, I need the overall diameter to be 1.5 inches by 2 inches. I'll start by first trimming a square side on my table saw and then rip it down to a final width of 1.5 inches. This dimension may change depending on the size of your watches or bracelets, so keep that in mind when creating your project. To make the piece more suitable for watches, I wanted to add a roundover to all 4 sides, which is going to give it a slightly oval shape in the end. As always, be sure to use push sticks when cutting small pieces on a router table like this to avoid contact with the blade. Once our edges are rounded over, we can cut the watch section to the final width, and I chose 4 inches for this, but it is dependent on how many watches or bracelets you choose to store. Next, we can create the center stand that will hold the watch and phone holder from our leftover lumber. Here I'm just finding the angle that I want the stand to sit at, as I know that I want to have it tilted back a little bit. I determined that I needed to cut a 15-degree angle to give the stand the look that I wanted, but this may change depending on your project. The overall height of this piece is going to be 9 inches to leave plenty of room for the phone stand. Once cut the length, we can rip it down to the final width of 3 inches and apply the same roundover to all 4 edges. Before moving on, I'll do a quick test fit just to make sure that the angle and the size of the watch holder are correct. Next, we need to create the phone stand that will attach to the other side of our center support. For this part, I'm going to plane it down to a thickness of 1/2 inch to make sure the overall piece doesn't feel too heavy. Once the piece is milled down, we can cut it to length at 7 inches, which is going to fit most sizes of phones. This can be made smaller or larger depending on the size of phone that you have. Finally, I'll cut another 1/2 inch piece that will attach to the bottom and use as the support for the phone. We can add a very small amount of glue to this bottom piece as we don't want to have any excessive squeeze out to clean up later. Then we'll add a clamp and let this dry and move on to gluing up the watch and center stand. For the center support, we're going to have to do this glue up in two parts, so I'm going to start with the watch holder section. The placement of this piece is up to you, but I do like to have it centered in the middle of the board and make sure that the angle is correct. While this part is drying, we can come back to our phone holder and remove any glue squeeze out from the edges. Once the watch section is dry, we can remove it from the clamps and glue up the second half of this center support. Once again, be sure to use a very small amount of glue when applying this phone holder to the side of the support, as it will be very difficult to sand the glue squeeze out afterwards. Once the center stand is dry, we can now move to the final attachment of the stand to the base. To do this, I'll just find the center of my base and determine how far back I want the stand to sit. This can be adjusted depending on how much room you want on the front of the base for storage. I'll apply a small amount of glue to the bottom of the stand and then use a brad nailer to hold it in place as it dries, as getting a clamp on this part is a little difficult. Now that our Valet stand is fully assembled, we're ready to apply the finish of our choice. We chose Rubio Monocoat Pure for this project, as the color is really suitable for that natural mahogany finish. Before applying, we need to wipe the surface down with mineral spirits to remove any dust or dirt. Then we can mix up our finish and apply a small amount to the top surface using a white Scotch-Brite pad to spread it evenly across the wood grain. Once the finish is applied, it's important to buff out as much as possible from the surface before letting it cure. This is a great finish for mahogany or many other premium wood species that are available at Osborne. Thanks for joining me for this video. If you're interested in the 4x1 S4S lumber from Osborne, you can check out the link in the description below, as well as a link to the 5/4 lumber for larger projects. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment, and we'll see you next time in the Builder Studio.